Somebody said you got a new friend. And it's us, Columbia House Party, your new favorite podcast. I'm Blake Murphy. Jake, what's going on, buddy?
Not much. How you?
I'm doing well.
Feeling good?
Yeah, feeling good. I'm really excited for today's episode.
Me too.
It's been a cool part of the process is just like listening to this album from that you had heard a while back. And obviously you don't keep an album like this one in your heavy rotation, at least with our tastes. And
totally.
I very much try to keep with new music as well. So you don't get to dive into an older album a couple times through.
Yeah, it feels like one of those albums where, when I make my year-end lists and I go back to an album from like January, I'm like, oh, that album kicks ass. This is like that, but from 9 years ago.
This is going to be, I'm really interested to see how this episode goes.
Me too.
It's a different genre than we've talked about. This is going to be fun. Also, the album just kicks so much ass.
It's so good.
Jake, what album did you bring today?
So to set it up a little bit, sort of connecting it to the pop punk emo thing, where there was a moment in time, 2002 to 2006, where pop punk and emo were the dominant force at least in the crowds I trafficked in. Similarly, in around 2010, in the crowds that I trafficked in, dance pop, when dance punk were becoming the things, with the pitchfork crowd, so to speak, LCD Sound System, Hot Chip, Cut Copy were all released albums that year, all did extremely well. As detailed, everything was coming out of sort of that New York dance scene, as detailed in Lizzie Goldman's Meet Me in the Bathroom, which if you haven't read, you should read it. Bands like The Rapture.
I read that on vacation this summer. The 1 week I let myself take off. It was awesome. That is so tremendous, the short chapters as a beach read was just amazing.
Great book.
It's like 600 pages and I read it in like 2 days.
I read it in 1 week. I was away as well.
It's so, it's addicting.
Yeah.
Because you want to see where it's going next.
It's great. And it's an interesting story of what is pulled out of what.
And everyone sucks.
But out of that sort of New York dance punk scene came all this big push towards dance pop. And you see it now, especially in what's popular in pop music today. And one of the people at the forefront of this genre made an album out of Sweden in 2010. A woman by the name of Robyn. So today, we're talking about Body Talk.
Somebody said you got a new friend. Does she love you better than I can? Black sky over my town. I know where you at, I bet she's around. Yeah, I know it's stupid, but just gotta see it for myself. I'm in the corner, watching you kiss her.
So as prep for each of these episodes, obviously I've listened to the albums a couple of times through. Sometimes if I'm on public transit or something like that, I don't have notes handy. I just make notes on my phone.
Yep.
I looked at them this morning for this one. These are the 3 notes that I have throughout. Holy shit, this album rules. Wow, this album is so horny.
Yep.
And this fucking bangs. These are my extremely nuanced takes on this album, is just that it's awesome.
My takes on this album are exactly the same. Plus, boy, this album makes me miss doing drugs.
Yes, I did not do as many of those.
I don't anymore, but this album's like, 2010. Sure.
I've always been, I'm a little high energy, a little high strung.
Yeah.
I don't know if the uppers are
that's fair.
The right move for
we
me,
need to get too into that on a public podcast. But
sure.
Anyway.
We can.
We will one day.
Yeah, the idea we kicked around the other night. That's certainly not going to make the air. Here's the 7-hour unpublished podcast. It can be like that mystery Sportsfeld episode
that no one's ever heard. Yeah.
Yes,
Which
the
one
lost
day
one
you'll-
where we were optimistic about the 2017 Blue Jays.
Yeah, I was so in the tank.
Yeah, that was not good.
Anyway, Body Talk by Robyn. So Robyn was born on June 12th, 1979 in Sweden. Her first sort of exposure to the music world. She recorded the theme song to, I am going to pronounce this wrong and I apologize, for Du kan alltid bli nummer ett, translated to You Can Always Be Number One, the theme song for a Swedish television show, Lilla Sportspegeln, in 1991 at the age of 12.
Love that show.
At age 14, after competing in a middle school, after completing her middle school education in 1993, Robyn signed with Ricochet Records Sweden, released her debut album in October 1995, which was then carried by a hit that was not on the album at first. The album was re-released in 1997 in North America to include the Max Martin co-written hit, Show Me Love.
Always been told that I've got too much pride, too independent to have you by my side. But my heart said all of you would say, just don't live for someone until you live for me. Never thought I would find love so sweet. Never thought I would meet someone like you. But now I found you and I tell you no lie. This love I got for you could take me around the world. Now show me love, show me life. Baby, show me what it's all about. You're the one that I ever needed. Show me love and what it's all about. Alright.
If there's a song that sounds more like 1995 pop music, I'm not sure there's one more than Show Me Love.
It's amazing. I love that album.
So I'm going to admit, I don't know that album very well. I remember that hit and that, like, that song was everywhere.
I'm gonna pocket the discussion on that album for
Okay.
at the end. I have a little something from it.
Okay. Well, Show Me Love did quite well. It was a top 10 hit on the Billboard chart, as was Do You Know What It Takes. Both songs were put on the 1997 re-release of Robyn Is Here, which is her debut album, which peaked at number 57 on the Billboard 200 and is certified platinum in the US. It sort of put her on the map as a young man. There was a lot of those in the 90s, just like people too young to be pop stars, but who were pop stars and just giving these like great tunes.
You see this with any kind of like genre boom too, right? Where once a couple of them are successful, major labels will give deals to a ton of them.
Yeah.
Because your first record contract or your first major label one is probably fairly inexpensive from the label's perspective. And then if things hit, then like it's the old sports strategy of like, let's sign a bunch of bad guys
totally.
and see if any of them click. And
Yeah, people
I feel like that
clamoring
happens
for
every
it.
time there's a genre boom. We talked about it with a few of the albums that we discussed, like after Pinkerton, how suddenly that made emo commercially viable. It's like, okay, well this is what this moment is right now, Spice Girls and Backstreet Boys and Robyn and all this stuff. So let's throw a bunch of record deals out there at people who might hit, and let's see how long we can ride this wave.
And I think what's interesting, it crosses mediums as well. Like there's The Ringer just did a great piece on a series of pieces on comedy movies in the 1990s, and talking about that exact thing, about how in the 90s, all of a sudden your like box office leaders for the year were comedy movies like Austin Powers and Ace Ventura and the Wayne's World movies. Like these movies did huge, massive business. And then all of a sudden it was just like carte blanche to give all these guys, studio deals to make these movies. And that's how you got the Will Ferrell canon and the Judd Apatow canon and the Jim Carrey canon, and
For better or for worse.
For better or for worse. But it's this exactly what you're talking about. This is successful. This is working. So we'll take anything. We'll take any of them. And if they work, great. If they don't, they cost nothing to make. So we'll just keep going. Anyway, Robyn Is Here was a very, not even a moderate success, was a success, especially for a debut album by a 15-year-old. My Truth was released in 1999 in Sweden only. My Truth was not released in the US, despite the success of Robyn Is Here, partly because it included 2 songs which reference an abortion she had in her teens, which is a controversy for things in the States that would not go away anytime soon. Robyn ended her relationship with her label in 2004 because Jive Records reacted negatively to Who's That Girl, which was a single of hers that had a new electropop sound, which was the direction she wanted to go into to move away from her pop starlet mid-90s pop sound. So she decided to release music on her own, and in early 2005, she announced she was leaving Jive to start her own label. She didn't put out an album between that period, and then in 2010, she decided that she wasn't going to put out one album. She wasn't going to put out two albums. The year of 2010 was going to be the year of Robyn. So, it's 2010. Robyn is sitting on just a treasure trove of songs. She said in 2010, I have all these great songs, so why not? It's been 5 years since Robyn, and I didn't want to wait with the release until they all got recorded, so I decided to start putting them out right away. The songs that are on the first album are simply the first ones that I finished. So which like makes sense. Everyone should just do that.
It does make sense. That is like, especially ahead of its time in the streaming era. Like, why wouldn't you do that now?
Totally.
I remember reading a thing when Carly Rae Jepsen's new album came out that like she had tons and tons of songs, and it was a painstaking process for her to select which ones. And even like Party for One was included on that album, even though it wasn't planned to be, because it was just such a success as a streaming single. If you're an artist now and you have too many songs, like it's just
put them out. Yeah.
As long as you're comfortable with the quality of them, why? Like, look.
If you have the self-confidence of a Robyn, then you can just be like, let's hear.
If you're a punk band, give me 10 or 12 songs on a 35-minute album.
Right.
If you are a pop star who relies heavily on streaming and radio play, throw it all out there.
Give me the bangers.
Drake released an entire album of just like individual songs he had just thrown out there, not on albums at any other point.
And I think it's going to be more popular. Like the new Hold Steady record that came out this year. Obviously,
do you like them?
A little bit. Obviously, not a band on like success par with any of these, but like they put out over the last year and a bit, they put out a bunch of like 7 inches of just A sides and B sides, and the new album was just 5 of those, and then 5 new tracks, and then there's your new album. Saves you from recording half an album, and it's also like, oh, new stuff, cool, great. Anyway, Body Talk Part 1 was released on June 11th, 2010. She began working on the album in July 2009 in Stockholm with Swedish producer Klaus Ahlund, who also acted as the executive producer on this album and co-wrote most of the music. He has worked with Charlie XCX, Tove Lo, Usher, Kesha, Britney Spears, and of course, his best contribution to music, he worked with the great Eagle Eye Cherry.
There you go.
One day, maybe. Robyn said
we could probably do I know you're going to take offense to the term one-hit wonder because I'm sure you like some Eagle Eye Cherry.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend I have a deep knowledge of the Eagle Eye Cherry catalog.
There's a one-hit wonder episode somewhere.
Oh, I think so. Safe Night's a great song. Robyn said that the whole album is about being really lonely, but I think it's interesting to put that idea in a club where a lot of people are crammed into a small room. I've been touring so much the last 3 years and spent a lot of time in clubs just watching people, and it became impossible not to use that lyric, Dancing on My Own, because it's such a beautiful picture. So the first single off Body Talk Part 1 was the great, perfect, you heard it before, Dancing on My Own, which like, I know it's now appearing on all these like best of the decade lists as it should. It might be like, it is. It's a top 3 song of the decade.
It's so
like,
good.
It's so perfect.
It's like, obviously,
I don't like using the term it's a perfect song, but like it is a perfect song.
It's just like, how do you listen to that and A, not dance, and B, not get it stuck in your head?
Yeah, and so what's interesting about, well, when we get into like Body Talk proper, Dancing on My Own is the second song on Body Talk Part 1. It's the first song on the US release of Body Talk.
This was
and
interesting.
The third song on the Swedish release of Body Talk.
When I was looking at the album order,
yes.
I won't say why. I don't know if people have caught on to why yet. I was unsure of which was the first track.
Yes, I went
with the US release.
I did too.
Obviously, my American-centric center of the universe.
So but I also think like we talked a bit last episode about album sequencing.
Mm-hmm.
And like and we're talking about it from the baseball analogy of put your leadoff hitters, you need him to get the most at bats. How do you not have this as the first track?
Yeah, it's just such a great tone setter
And like
too. Like
Fembot's a good song, but to me, it's not a like album opener. This is like, I know what I'm getting now.
yeah, I don't think the best song always has to go first, like especially in other genres.
I don't either.
But this one is just like
We've mentioned a lot so far in this show about the capital T-S, the song from the album. You know, it's whether it's Sugar Going Down or Welcome to Black Parade or El Scorcho or whatever. But like, I don't think we've come across a song yet in this show that is like so head and shoulders clearly the song on an album. And it's not that the rest of the album isn't good. The other album is fucking awesome. The other single is an incredible, incredible best of the decade song. But like, Dancing on My Own is one of those songs that will just stand the test of time. I think it's one of those perfectly constructed, perfectly written. The build is great. The chorus is great. The beat is great, of just like in like the canon of pop music. And I don't want to go too much into hyperbole here, but I also don't think I am, because it is just that like in the canon of 2000s dance pop, it's way up there.
just also like look at what it did for her. She had some crossover success in 1995. We're talking 15 years later, where she's mostly just been an artist in Sweden, and this song puts her to the forefront of American pop music as well, and like has had follow-up success. It was huge
When this song came out, and I can't remember where I was, but when I learned that the Robyn who did Dancing on My Own was the same Robyn who did Show Me Love, I didn't believe it. I thought that like I'd forgotten about Show Me Love by 2010, but also like when someone was like, "Oh, Robyn, remember from the 90s," and I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about," and then like Show Me Love, and I couldn't believe it was the same person.
Can I jump ahead in the timeline?
Absolutely,
a little bit here?
yeah.
So I didn't know either. This was a little after all three parts had come out. In December, she was on SNL.
Right.
So Dancing on My Own had this success. Call Your Girlfriend was out as a
There's
second.
the Taran Killam video.
Yes.
Yeah.
So not only at that point, I would still watch Saturday Night Live.
Yeah. Oh,
just
yeah.
hoping it would get better.
We all had our Saturday Night Live time.
And I just thought it was so strange that Katy Perry was hosting and wasn't the musical guest. And then it was Robyn. And I had the same kind of thing. Like, wait a second, I got to fire up Wikipedia. Like, did someone just rip off Robyn's name? Or
Right.
is this the same person 15, 16 years later? And then, yeah, hilarious that Taran Killam doing his version of that video gets like 1.2 million views on YouTube. So suddenly not only does Robyn have this huge hit and she's doing SNL, but now there's like a viral thing also being like, hey, Robyn.
And
it's
like
crazy how those things kind of lined up.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those, this song and Call Your Girlfriend are those kind of songs that just sort of enter the canon of music, in the sense of, when this came out, I didn't listen to Body Talk in 2010, even though I was very much into like the dance pop, dance punk stuff at this time. But I didn't really, the album it wasn't in my purview, so I didn't really.
Yeah, it's like, that's a cool song, but that's not something I would grab online.
But the song has just been so ingrained in me since then. I think in pop culture that you're just like, oh yeah, Robyn, Dancing on My Own, for sure, and that's the power of like a great pop song, where it just becomes your signature tune, and it becomes so ubiquitous to you that's like, oh, of course, Robyn, Dancing on My Own, great song.
Yeah, it's like this. You mentioned Eagle Eye Cherry. It's like, okay, one hit wonders have this weird power of like, they were only relevant to you for a minute and you remember that. Now here you have someone who not only it certainly wasn't a one hit wonder, but you have a song the size of that, and also it's just backed up by this enormous catalog of also good stuff. And it's like, yeah, of course that song is going to lock in like that, but then also you have all this other good stuff.
And I do think Robyn does benefit from the fact she doesn't put out a ton of music. So like she's one of those few pop artists now, because of the streaming age, because everyone can just put out anything at any time. She's one of the few, like when she put out Honey, it was like, oh, there's a new Robyn record, because there hadn't been one in 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think that benefits her as well. Anyway, Dancing on My Own is perfect, as we said. She said that it was inspired by her love of inherently sad gay disco anthems, which seems accurate. It was composed by Robyn and Patrick Berger. She said, people have so many expectations when they go out, so many wishes about what their night is going to be. If they're going to meet that person, have a fun time with their friends, have a good high, hear good music. People get drunk and turn into themselves in a way, and they go to experience some kind of emotion. But it's not always about fun. There's a destructive side to it. but I'm more into the empowerment of going out because it's always been the place where I could be myself and get inspired. Even if I'm sad, dancing is a way to let stuff out. And if that's not a quote for the sad boys to get into Robyn, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I wish I had found Robyn
Me too.
a little earlier. Like there was a stretch where post undergrad, pre going back to school to be a writer, where I was just like living in Kitchener and working, and I would just like go out in Waterloo, and it would suck. Like I just didn't like being there and stuff. And
Right.
if you could have given me some of that,
Yeah, like 2010 for me is when I think of that, as I said off the top, I was in school, I was in undergrad at that time, I was living in Montreal. That year, 2010, 2011 was my big like I was always the guy for my entire life who's like, I don't dance. I don't go to clubs with dance floors. Like I was just always that guy because I was, as we established in the show.
I only skank.
Yeah. As we established over the course of the show, I was fucking insufferable as a younger person. But 2010, 2011 was when I started getting into bands like LCD and Hot Chip and Cut Copy that was like, oh no, dancing's fun and dancing's cool and dance music is cool. And I wish that Robyn had been in that rotation because I think I would have had a lot of fun with it.
And it probably would have opened you up to a ton of other like adjacent music that
I think
also
so.
we probably just like missed on in that era. And obviously
Totally.
you can shift your changes or shift your tastes now and get this era of that stuff. But I'm sure there's some great Robyn adjacent stuff from 2010 to
Totally.
like 2015.
It took me until a couple of years ago to like,
Yeah,
like
2015, I feel like
Yeah.
was the year of
everyone's kind of like, oh wait, pop music's great.
emotion is
I think that's the gateway for a lot of older white men.
can't wait for that episode.
But anyway, Slant named Dancing on My Own the best song of 2010. So did The Guardian. Pitchfork named it the fourth best song of 2010. And then in
3 spots too low.
3 spots too low. And in 2019, Pitchfork named Dancing on My Own the third best song of the decade.
Do you know what was in front of it? Do you remember?
Yeah, at number 2, they had Oblivion by Grimes, which fuck out of here, Pitchfork. And All Right by Kendrick was number 1, which fair enough.
Yes.
Grimes
is
I don't get
Grimes
it.
is
I don't get it.
I loved
Grimes.
Art Angels.
I don't get it.
I certainly don't like all the things I've learned about Grimes since then. The weird fitness regimen.
Yeah, it's just
Of like, why don't you just like mountain hike and then get like eye implants and stuff like that?
Yeah,
And then
her
you'll be
music-
healthy and happy.
I don't think her music is bad. It's just not my thing.
Art Angels is good. It was a really good like running album.
I could see that.
Which is, and honestly, so in late 2015 to mid 2016, I was training for a half marathon. And that I feel like was the best way to get into pop music and just embrace it because it's way better running music than anything else.
Yeah,
It's like
I could see that.
Body Talk would have been a really good running album.
Yeah, oh my god. The other sort of I'm not sure you can go as far to call it a hit, but another song off Body Talk Part 1 that got let's call it press. It was a song called Dance Hall Queen, which was produced by Diplo.
I take the bus to town, sitting in the back and talk to no one. I got the high heels on, I go out dancing all by my own. People are pushing by, somebody always tries to cut in line. Soon as I get inside, I lose myself in the blinding lights. Now what? Your jaw has dropped until the music stops. You know I still run this thing like a dance hall queen. I really don't want no hassle. Now what? Your jaw has dropped until the music stops. You know I still run this thing like a dance hall queen. I really don't want no
This song was described as by Pop Matters as being the only real bomb on the album. I tend to agree.
Yeah. Stick to Major Lazer at this time, Diplo.
I get that like wanting to do a dance hall tune sort of I understand the desire for it, but I don't know if necessarily this was the best. Especially it also stands out to this album because the rest of the album is just like pure dance pop. And then like not saying she shouldn't experiment and go with outside the genre, but like
Yeah, and was dancehall fairly big in Sweden? That might be the thing that I'm missing on it
yeah,
too, right?
maybe it could be like a cultural thing in Sweden. I have no idea.
Sean Paul was huge around that time. Maybe there was some.
Yeah,
It's just not a good song.
No.
Maybe it was better then.
and like, but I think the Diplo connection sort of elevated it in like the scene a little bit. But yeah, it never really worked for me. But despite Dancehall Queen, part 1 was extremely well received. It got an 8.5 from Pitchfork, a B+ from the AV Club, and Michael Craig, writing for Music OMH, said that with Body Talk Part 1, Robyn is finally ready to take her place at pop's table of greats, which I think is hard to debate. Body Talk Part 2 was released on September 6th, 2010. It also was very well received, but did not, the one criticism level against it, which I think is only really applicable to the pop genre, is that it did not have a single quite, I mean, obviously it's not going to have a single like Dancing on My Own, but it didn't really have any single to like really blow it up.
Which is the one risk in splitting the album up into 3 and releasing it in chunks.
Yes, to the point where I wasn't actually even aware that there was multiple parts of this album.
Yeah, neither was I.
looking into
Like
this.
you said, it's on Spotify as all one.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was probably released in the US as just all one.
I think they were
eventually.
I think they were released individually, but
Okay.
then I think the one that was released in the US is a sort of compilation
Okay.
for that purpose. It was still well received. It got an 8 from Pitchfork and NME and an A- from the AV Club. The Guardian said that it was faster, harder, and clubbier than Part 1. Luke Winkle of Music OMH wrote a mixed review as well, saying that Part 2 doesn't have the same feel as Part 1. It's as if Robyn may have exhausted her supply of great songs too soon. It has its moments, but in general doesn't compare to Part 1. After all this criticism of not having another single and using up her best songs too soon, Body Talk, without a suffix, was released on November 22nd, 2010. It was a compilation or a best of the first 2 Body Talks, containing the quote-unquote best songs from the first 2 entries, as well as 5 new songs. The 5 new songs were also released as an EP called Body Talk Part 3. One of those 5 new songs was, I think we just did all those superlatives about Dancing on My Own being one of, if not the best song of the decade. I feel like this other single, you could make a case for being in the top 10 of the decade as well. I actually got into an argument the other night that it's actually better than Dancing on My Own, which I don't agree with, but I can hear the case for it. That is, of course.
Wait, you got an argument and you were saying, you were like pitching the idea that it was better than?
No. Someone said to me that it was better and I disagreed.
That makes more sense.
But that song, of course, is the 2012 nominee for Best Dance Recording at the Grammys, Call Your Girlfriend.
Call your girlfriend. It's time you had the talk. Give your reasons. Say it's not her fault. But you just met somebody new. Tell her not to get upset, second guessing everything you said and done. And when she gets upset, tell her how you never meant to hurt no one. And you tell her that the only way her heart will mend is when she learns to love again. And it won't make sense right now, but you're still her friend. And then you let her down easy. Call your girlfriend. It's time you had the talk. Give your reasons. Say it's not her fault. But you just met somebody new.
Call Your Girlfriend was extremely well received when it came out. Genevieve Koski of the AV Club said that Body Talk reaches its apex at the midpoint with Call Your Girlfriend, which turns the breakup anthem conceit into on its ear in a manner that makes Getting Dumped seem inspiring.
it's so good from that lens of it's such a simple song.
Yeah.
And it's really, obviously the beat is amazing and she's such a talented singer, but the simplicity of it and the like, I appreciate the, hey, here's a non-asshole-ish way to break up with someone, by the way. Like the actual content is just like, hey,
And I also
maybe think about this.
I also think like this song and Dancing on My Own both have such an undercurrent of sadness to them that like now that this sounds too regressive and I don't mean it the way, but now that like sad girl music is extremely popular with like the indie kids, which the male indie kids as well as the female indie for sure, but like
Give me that boy genius.
yeah, exactly. Like I feel like if this came out today, it would, not that it wasn't like massive at the time,
I got you.
it would explode today. Like it would be like everyone would be going fucking crazy for this today.
Yes, we have poptimism happened, and then we have the sad girl indie folk moment happen. And what if we just
Combine
merge
the
those
two. Yeah, exactly.
How many people do you think broke up with a significant other, like with this
Using
as a
the
template
words.
in mind? It's just like, okay, I gotta tell them it's not their fault. Don't say this and don't say that.
It's good advice.
And then yeah,
It's good advice. So
the
more people should listen to Robyn.
yeah. The one issue I have with it is like, I feel like throwing in it doesn't make sense now, but I'm still your friend.
Yeah.
No one's gonna.
No one
receive
wants to hear
well.
that.
No, never.
Scott Plagenhoff of Pitchfork wrote that Robyn is as grateful about this role as when she plays the other points in the love triangle. He described it as one of the most adult, thoughtful pop music breakups since the Field Mice's Willow, but naturally without the twee pop OG's sense of melancholy. God, that's a Pitchfork sentence. But the point, I think, stands and is valid. Body Talk itself was recognized as number 8 on the 200 best album of the 2010s by Pitchfork in October 2019. The album itself received an 8.7 from Pitchfork, an A from the AV Club, and an A from Entertainment Weekly. It was chosen as the second best album of 2010 by Pop Justice and Slant Magazine, the third best album released in 2010 by Entertainment Weekly, MTV, and Billboard, the 10th best album by both the AV Club and Spin, and was selected as the 14th best album of 2010 by Rolling Stone. As of 2013, combined sales of the 3 parts of the Body Talk series are 170,000 copies in the United States. I believe it's gone platinum as well. All told, the Body Talk experiment was a commercial success as well as a critical one. There's one more song I want to talk about.
Okay, good. I have a couple that I just have like very quick thoughts on.
The first one I want to talk about is a song called You Should Know Better, which features our old friend Snoop Dogg with it's a great like little drive-in dance song, but contains just the silliest fucking verse from Snoop Dogg in the world.
I've gone around the world in the 7 seas. I'm cashing 6-figure checks in all currencies. It's like when I be tearing it up in Paris. Motherfuckers parlay on the MIC. It's all ooh la la and ah wee wee. We busy sipping Van Blanc in our lingerie. Chopping heads off with Madame Guillotine. Even the French know better than to fuck with me.
Como telephone, Robyn, what it do? I'm in the UK, got a show to do. It's Big Snoopy Dogg, check the catalog. I'm overseas getting cheese with this dialogue. I miss my plane to Spain, so I'm stuck in Kelowna. I'm sipping Corona with this chick named Ramona. She wants me to take a flick on her phone, then take her to my hotel room and then hold her.
In Rome, I sat down with the woman, said we need a black hope, and she better be a woman. There'll be no more celibacy. Even the Vatican knows not to fuck with me.
You should know better.
You should know better.
You should know better than to fuck with me.
If you knew better, you would do better.
You should know better.
You should know better.
You should know better than to fuck with me. If you knew better, you would do better.
Oh, Snoop, bless you.
Rhyming Televue with What It Do is inspired. Kawhi Leonard could never.
Could never.
Televue, baby.
It's so, I don't want to say it's out of place, but like when I was re-listening to the album and I didn't remember really or know that this was on there, it caught me off guard. I'm like, oh, that's Snoop Dogg being silly.
There was like a 7-year stretch where Snoop Dogg was just featuring on everyone's tracks, though. He was just on everything.
Yeah, he was. And
He's
so,
so insanely rich, and like everyone just likes him so much that why wouldn't you throw Snoop on a track if it's gonna get a couple more people to listen? If you ever go on Snoop Dogg's Wikipedia page, there's like a sub page of songs Snoop Dogg has featured on, and it's
longer than most artists like actual Wikipedia pages.
So I went down a rabbit hole with this, and I was like, okay, what other weird out of genre songs has Snoop Dogg featured on? I came across a Spotify playlist that was the top 100 Snoop Dogg features. So this person had to narrow the list down to 100 Snoop Dogg features.
Oh my God.
It was a lot. Anyway,
the other song that I quite like from this record that I don't really have a ton to say about, and the fact that I think it's a really sort of interesting song, especially in the context of this album and what Robyn seems to believe about herself and about her place in pop music, is We Dance to the Beat, which I think is interesting because obviously Robyn has a lot more of like the Euro pop inspiration just based on being from Sweden, and there's a much bigger scene of that there than was here. And for an album that did sort of come into that 2010s dance pop world, there's just it seems like you hear it a little bit also in Hot Chip as well, because they're English, so they have a lot more Euro influence in them. And this is one of those songs where like I find that artists in this genre and from that side of the pond, so to speak, always have a song like this on their records that's just kind of like, oh, by the way, here's a sweet ass Eurobeat song.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, it's so good.
It has another one on there, Don't Fucking Tell Me What to Do.
Yeah, it's very similar.
I love that. That song reminded me a lot of Marie Davidson, who had a really great 2019 album that was up for the Polaris Prize, actually. There's a song called Work It that's the same kind of thing of just like, here's this amazing beat and then some lyrics on top of it about like, I mean, in her case, it's about, you know, what the work-life balance challenges and stuff, and like very feminist within that. And then in Robyn's case, like, Don't Fucking Tell Me What to Do. If you were not paying attention, that could be Marie Davidson song, could be a Robyn song, could be a fucking Lonely Island song. It's just like, it's very, here's a beat and I'm going to talk over it. And it's, I don't know, it works for me.
It works for me too. And I think I like it. And I find it interesting in terms of sort of the context of the rest of the album. These two songs specifically, Don't Fucking Tell Me What to Do and We Dance to the Beat, in that a lot of the non-singles off of Body Talk are very, like the two singles, as we talked about, are very mature sort of relationship, sad songs. The rest of the album is basically Robyn being like, fuck you, I'm awesome.
Yeah. I mean, and then Fembot is an interesting, like, my place in the industry. Like, it's more of an industry commentary. That's a good song. I can't not think of Austin Powers. It's really unfortunate.
Which I assume is sort of the point, but...
Yes. It made me wish that, look, obviously we did not need another Austin Powers movie.
No.
But...
having Robyn play a Fembot.
One more with
Robyn?
Robyn?
She can just play a song. It doesn't just sing for us. Robyn did.
Don't say it like that. Sing for us, Robyn.
You know what I mean.
This is a song about how the industry uses women. You're just like, Robyn.
Robyn told Pitchfork about Don't Fucking Tell Me What to Do. She said, that song isn't about anybody in particular as much as it's about myself during a period where I came off from touring and was tired of having people pulling me in all kinds of directions, and I wasn't really able to say no, which makes sense. And I think is sort of an interest, especially for someone who came up as ostensibly a child star.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an interest. I'd like to hear almost more songs about that from her, because I think it's an interesting perspective of like how, just based on her age and based on her massive success immediately, there's no way she had, until she left her label being like, this is the kind of music I want to make. There's no way she had like a lot of control.
It would be like you directing your own indie flick.
Well, this was better.
Sorry, man.
That would have been a disaster.
I had to make the parallel.
But I think that she is, you don't see that a lot in music.
Right.
Unless it's a fucking disaster like the Jacksons or something. Like, I think I think that's a point of view that I would like to hear more in her music. Because I think it's just such a unique perspective and a unique experience.
Yeah.
That I think I'd like to hear more from it. She also told Pitchfork that the album as a whole is a contradiction because I make pop music, but at the same time, I'm maybe not so anxious to be a successful pop artist. Of course, I want people to like my music, but I know what the price of success can be too. Basically, I'm happy as long as I can keep my freedom, so I'm so happy with the way things are at the moment. I get to be hands-on with the details in every aspect of what I'm doing, but I also get to perform for a big audience. I really found my voice on the last albums, but songs like With Every Heartbeat and Be Mine and Konnichiwa Bitches were like starting points. I wrote Every Heartbeat, so there's a reason why Dancing on My Own sounds similar. For me, that's a good thing. I admire the Ramones and Johnny Cash as artists that did the same things over and over again, which I think is an interesting point too, in the sense that I think a lot of pop music gets sort of dismissed or looked down on for sounding the same. And then you have Robyn being like, yeah, no, it totally sounds the same. I wrote it.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah. I'm
all the artists you look up to sound the same too.
Yeah. I'm still Robyn.
Yeah.
What do you want me to do about it?
So Body Talk's huge success. She didn't release another album, as we said, until 2018 when she released Honey, which was a massive critical success. It was on 15 different best of 2018 lists.
16. I'm
yours
assuming
as
you
well?
didn't include mine in that.
Oh no,
tally?
sorry, 17 because apparently it was on Jacob Kramer's too.
Okay.
It got an 8.5 from Pitchfork. Was named the 4th best album of 2018 and the 71st best album of the decade by that same publication.
It's really good.
It is. So
Not quite the highs.
no,
of
but
Body Talk,
but again,
obviously.
the highs of Body Talk are two of the best songs ever made.
Yes.
But so that's Body Talk. We're gonna do the back half of this.
The back third.
The back third, yeah. Usually we'll debate the rankings of songs or albums. I think it's pretty clear what the best songs are on
it's
Body
an
Talk.
Unquestionable 1-2.
Yeah, and Dancehall Queen is pretty much. I think we can both agree it's the least good song on the album.
Yeah, I think probably in popularity, Fembot's probably number 3, but I think I'd have Don't Fucking Tell Me What to Do there.
Yeah, I think I would too. I'm also a big fan. As I said, I'm a big fan of We Dance to the Beat.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a lot more for us to say on the rankings because we talked about Call Your Girlfriend and Dance Coming On because they're the best ones. So instead, we're going to talk about a little something called poptimism. So, poptimism. Let's call it a spark plug term in music criticism these days. Poptimism it's also called popism. It's a mode of discourse which holds that pop music deserves the same respect as rock music and is as authentic and as worthy of professional critique and interest. It first developed a following in Cara Wilson's book about the Celine Dion album Let's Talk About Love, and in an essay against rockism in the New York Times in 2004.
God, that essay is bad.
Yeah. It said, the essay asked listeners to stop pretending that serious rock songs will last forever as if anything could, and that shiny pop songs are inherently disposable as if that were necessarily a bad thing. Van Morrison's Into the Music was released the same year as the Sugar Hill Gang's Rapper's Delight. Which do you hear more often? So,
titling that essay The Pernicious Rise of Poptimism.
So I have a lot of thoughts on poptimism. And I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but I do agree with some of it. And I don't think it's as dirty a word as it should be sort of treated as. I don't necessarily agree with what that essay is arguing and what that quote is arguing.
Yeah, that essay is not good. That essay is basically just like, well, if I, a critic, don't like it, then it serves no purpose.
Yeah, by its impoverished terms, the rockist represents traditional values of authenticity, while the poptimist is progressive, inclusive, and sees through the myths of authenticity. The rockist is nostalgic, the old fart who says they don't make any good music anymore, while the poptimist looks forward and values the new. The rockist makes art out of popular music, insists on serious meaning, and demands artists who sing their own songs and play instruments, preferably guitars. The poptimist lets pop be fun, and if not meaningless, slight. The rockist is a purist, the poptimist is a pluralist. The rockist is old, the popist is young. The rockist is anti-commercialist, the poptimist could care less. And I don't agree with any of that, despite the fact I am pro-poptimism.
Yeah.
I think
there's an oversimplification, there's reductionism there. It's
Yeah, and I think it's also my issue with the discourse surrounding poptimism and rockism and all that is it ascribes like value judgments to an inherently subjective thing, which
also the idea that like rock is popular because it's good and pop is popular because of capitalism.
Yeah,
have you listened to some rock music,
right?
man?
And like I think there's parts of each that are like all things in this world, though. There's parts of each that are true and parts of each that aren't. Like they cite Van Morrison. You ever gone to see Van Morrison live? It's fucking terrible. Where like you go to a Carly Rae Jepsen show and everyone's having the best time of their lives, and like Van Morrison's sitting with his back to the audience playing the piano, singing. It's just. I think that.
Did you read any of the responses to the New York Times article?
Some of them, not all of them, but
okay.
please.
Vice had one that was very Vice, titled "The New York Times Doesn't Know Shit About Poptimism." There was some more nuanced ones, though. Actually, the thing that I found probably most interesting in reading about some of this stuff, it wasn't there's another piece that I want to talk about after that was really, really good. But there was, in 2014, Elizabeth Keenan wrote about how there's misogyny plays a role in the critiques of poptimism because poptimism skews non-white male more than rock does and more than the typically critically acclaimed music of the earlier period had. So she wrote a piece called Gender Trouble, Poptimism, and the Male Critical Voice. She said, I thought I was reading a parody when she, in response to the New York Times thing. But it was an interesting reminder that, you know, rock music has generally been very white and very male. And I knew that a lot of the anti-poptimism takes were bad, but I hadn't considered really that they were also not privileged, but like from
which rock criticism is historically.
Yeah. So that was a really helpful thing to read. Anyway, again, that was Elizabeth Keenan, and it was called Gender Trouble, Poptimism, and the Male Critical Voice. Worth a read, especially if you are, like us, a white male who is, you know, trying to contextualize poptimism, but maybe you don't have the perspective for all of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that first essay came out in 2004, and it seems like the discourse around it has shifted a little bit. In 2015, Washington Post writer Chris Richards, who was also in a band called Q and Not You, which are one of the best fucking bands ever, wrote that after a decade of righteously vanquishing rockism's nagging falsehood, poptimism has become the prevailing ideology for today's most influential music critics. Few would drop this word in conversation at a house party or a nightclub, but in music journo circles, the idea of poptimism itself is holy writ. And I think this is where I struggle with poptimism. I think the negative sides of poptimism were sort of outlined in an essay by Michael Hand for The Quietus in 2017, where he said the poptimists are just as prescriptive as the raucous, and listed there's a few poptimist sacred cows which are beyond challenge, which is the solo release by a member of a manufactured group is no longer the sad addendum to the imperial years. It's a profound statement of artistic integrity. The surprise release by a big name act is in itself a revolutionary act, and to not care about Taylor Swift or Beyonce or Lady Gaga or Zayn Malik is in itself questionable. It reveals not your taste in music, but your prejudices. In the worst case scenario, you may be revealing your unconscious racism and sexism. At best, you're trolling. Commercial success in and of itself should be taken as at least one of the markers of quality. After all, 50 million Elvis fans can't be wrong. And just as authenticity is worthless as a symbol of music's worth, so the contrivance and cynicism might be elevated and celebrated as evidence of the maker's awareness of the game they are playing. So this is where I get into sort of the yes and no of this. I agree.
This is where Steve has really hot takes too, on the commercial side.
And he and I have had that discussion before as well.
It's also where Emotion by Carly Rae Jepsen gets super interesting because it wasn't all that successful, but is critically acclaimed.
Right.
That's fairly rare for this subsection of the pop genre.
I think where I and the critics of poptimism agree is the idea that, and I think this is more has to do with the discourse and subculture of quote unquote art in 2019 than it does to any one genre of music. But my issue with it that I think poptimism has caused is that now there are certain artists who are infallible in the public eye, and the critique around their music has become pointless. I'm thinking of Beyonce. I'm thinking of Carly Rae Jepsen.
There's also an intersection there of the problem with access journalism in music.
Totally.
Where, you know, access is more and more limited and it's closer and closer to PR. And then, so how do you be critical and still hope to get access to do proper journalism? And like, you know, the best album reviews are the ones who get to talk to the artist about what went into it and what it means.
Right. Because reviews of art are inherently stupid.
Yeah.
Like whether it's music, whether it's movies, it doesn't matter. It's inherently silly. Maybe
don't say that on a podcast where we're doing exactly that.
No, but I think
I get what you mean.
I think it's true. I think discussion is good, and I think like personal experience and personal preference and personal opinion is good. But the idea of assigning a number value to it is believe me, I've tried. Yeah, I think reviews themselves are fine, but the idea of scoring them is silly.
Yeah.
I do understand the purpose, but I also think that, I do think that this does skew, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. I think that to your point about it being vaguely misogynistic is accurate, because when I think of those artists that are held up as infallible, the majority of them are female. Not all of them, but the vast majority are. And I do think there's a part of that being like, there are people looking to take down that, I think. But the other side of that is that like a Beyonce record will never be fully critically evaluated. or nor will Carly Rae, to be fair. You can like it or dislike it. That's two different things. But like a actual like discussion, or even Harry Styles, probably the same thing. Like it's an event. It's an album. It's a thing. You're not going to break it. Even Robyn, if we're being honest, like her music kicks ass and just put a lot of it out. But like it's not there. I do think that poptimism has created this cult of perfection around certain pop artists, where it's just going to. It's like when Rolling Stone reviews like a Springsteen or a Dylan record, or a U2 record, it's always 5 out of 5 stars because that's what Rolling Stone's version of poptimism is.
Yeah, there's an it's an interesting look at how poptimism has changed over the last decade, because it wasn't that at the start.
Yeah,
and obviously it existed before like 2010, but we're talking about this decade.
Or you can go back to the Beatles. Like
exactly. This is the terrific piece that I mentioned earlier. Robyn James, who is a UNC Charlotte associate professor of philosophy, or was at the time that she wrote this on her Sound Studies blog, has an incredible essay on the intersection of poptimism and feminism. I have like a page worth of quotes here from it. I won't do that. I just suggest you go look for it. It's Robyn James on a Sound Studies blog from 2018. But her points, to draw in vague terms, was basically that initially the gatekeepers of elite, this is a quote, the gatekeepers of elite musical taste generally agreed that commercial chart-oriented music whose fans were at least thought to be mainly teen girls and or gay men could be just as artistically valuable as rock and hip hop. And that upended the hierarchy between rock and pop, which, quote, is a contemporary variation on a very old hierarchy that privileged fine art over craft. Craft was subordinate to utility. So because rock was masculine, it was therefore superior.
Right.
There was a race intersectionality there as well. But she continues, what began as a feminist revolt now feels like an expectation or obligation to stand for the already powerful, such as corporations and megastars. Her conclusion is basically that in 2018, at the time of this, poptimism works very similar to popular feminism, where things that were traditionally devalued have been revalued, but now they're being used to make money.
Right.
And that's
capitalism is the problem again.
And that's not the end of the world. Toward her conclusion, she says, feminism TM is certainly limited and insufficient, but it can be a helpful gateway for beginners. Poptimism TM is similarly limited and insufficient, but we should think about how we can lead fans brimming with that kind of poptimism to a deeper engagement with the institutions and conventions that continue to value the same kind of people and the music they make.
Yeah, and I think that totally checks out to me.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
It's like, even if you don't love that poptimism is what sells and that's why it's promoted and things like that, it's a helpful introduction to. And
I wonder too if how much of it is rock music is not popular. If we're talking like big commercially like wise, it's not popular. Pop music is. I wonder if the sort of backlash against that is sort of that like, well, we want our music to be successful and popular again because this is what we always listened to, this is what we always liked.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this is my whole problem with the whole discussion. And this isn't pro or anti-poptimism or pro or anti-rockism. The issue is this idea of, and this is never going to change, it's just how pop culture works, but it's the idea of like pitting genre fans against the other and saying that one is worth more than the other on both sides, on both ways. And it's all bullshit. It's all critical review, which I understand. And again, it's intellectual and it can be smart and it can make good points and it can be this and that, the other, but it's just no one genre is perfect. No one genre is inherently more art than another genre. There can be capitalistic influences that maybe trivializes or like
well, who's the marketing muscle behind?
Exactly. Like
who's pushing to the top of the streams?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that just because, Katy Perry is manufactured to be incredibly capitalistically successful, that doesn't mean that all pop music is that. Just as it doesn't mean that because, The Clash were basically a boy band in punk. Like they crafted their own look at the time. And like they were very clearly conscious of making themselves commercially viable in that genre, even though they expanded the genre and are like an amazing band. But like, that's just because that's true doesn't make their music any worse. Just because one pop artist is held up as being this capitalistic enterprise doesn't mean that there isn't creative and interesting pop music being made at the exact same time.
To trace it back to Robyn, obviously she is far more on the interesting and actually good side.
Yes.
In part because she rolled out this album all on her own and in such a weird way and then didn't release anything for a long time. We've talked a lot and probably will continue to about like these fork in the road artists or songs or moments that allow the genre to open up a little more. Do you think that this was coming in general? Like, you can make the argument that poptimism had to come because the world is just getting so bad that we need stuff like that. But like without Robyn, do we get Carly Rae? Do we get Charlie XCX? Do Tegan and Sarah and Paramore pivot to like a synth pop sound? Do we get Churches coming over from?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
Obviously, you can't draw that line A to B, but I'm curious your thoughts on just how big Robyn was in that moment. Did that open people up more to poptimism or pop that could actually be really good?
Yeah, I don't know. At the time that at the time Body Talk came out, which I assume is we're talking from that sort of sphere. I was so worried about being cool myself or seeming cool.
But you're cool so naturally.
Well, that's just not true. That's because I worked at it for 30 years. No, I'm kidding. No, but I wasn't focusing on pop music because I'm exactly this issue that we're talking about. I was absolutely like fuck pop music, like rock is rock or rock adjacent acts. Or it was I think you saw this a lot in music journalism in the indie scene in 2010, where like you read Pitchfork lists from the end of the first decade of the 2000s, and it's all Pitchfork stuff, and they'd throw in one pop album to be like I remember in 2007, I think they named Future Sex Love Sounds the best album of the year, but it was very clearly done to be like, see, we like other stuff too.
Yeah, well,
and I feel like
we've done a lot of pop punk and emo episodes too, and you go back and like there are 1-paragraph reviews, and they have since done like 10-year or 15-year retrospectives on those.
Exactly. So I think that I was not close enough to that scene to really have an answer to that question. I think that that fact that people are more open to this kind of stuff definitely opens doors for it. And I think to your point about artists that sort of are the gateway drug to those genres are always useful. But I generally don't know if Robyn gets that credit. I think maybe she should, but I don't know if she does. And I think that this notion of pop being good or bad, or it used to be bad and now it's good because it has all this, is like go back and listen to like Britney Spears in like the late 90s and early 2000s. Like there's some great fucking songs there, but it was held up as such like throwaway garbage because that was also the way it was marketed. Mm-hmm. And that was also still like the end of.
But see, that's always going to be the issue with marketing toward a young audience, right? Is everyone over a certain age is going to be like, well, this is for a young audience.
Yeah, and I have a quote here from Salon in 2016 where Scott Timberg commented on critics giving increasing amounts of respect to celebrity chef Guy Fieri. And he said, love or hate what is called poptimism, the impulse seems to be coming to food and restaurant criticism as well. Timberg likened food critics in defense of Fieri's movement to rock critics who began writing apologias for Billy Joel while at the same time composing deconstructions of Britney Spears. And I think that it's complicated, I think. But yeah.
What do you think Guy Fieri listens to?
Like, probably like Nickelback, who again are part of this discussion. Where it's
some
like
actually good songs in there. You can't really get immensely popular without some.
And that's kind of what we very, very briefly touched on this in our Fall Out Boy episode. Mm-hmm. But I truly believe that just because something's popular doesn't mean it's bad.
Right.
I think there are tons of popular things that are bad, but I think you have to hit on something to become extremely popular. You yourself can also devalue that. Like I think about Kid Rock, who's extremely popular, but everything about
11 times platinum.
Right. But everything about him is bad. And I don't want him to have success.
Also, I hate that I know that he went 11 times platinum.
But like, that's crazy. That's so successful and so popular. And I think that I think that's why the poptimism argument is stupid. Because you can look at any genre and be like, this is the most successful guy. He might suck ass as a person, which like also is interesting because not all that is bad either, because the idea of any of this being all bad or all good is just incorrect.
Right.
And so I think the poptimism argument, I understand it from a commercial capitalist standpoint as potentially being a negative. I understand it from certain angles of criticism, but being a negative in terms of the infallibility of certain artists or the inability of other artists to ever be taken seriously ever, which I think is equal, like the Nickelback thing. I'm not a fan, but I think the fact that no matter what they put out, not that I think they will ever put out like any work of like genius or whatever, but if they did, it would never be listened to or taken seriously by the
Right.
critique.
Because, it's Nickelback. So you're going to put on Nickelback blinders to listen to it.
Exactly.
Now, you said nothing is all good or all bad. One disagreement as we wrap here. Dancing on My Own is all good.
Yes.
Objectively good.
Call Your Girlfriend, also objectively all good.
Which brings us to the toughest part of this episode of the podcast, I think. Which one's going on the mixtape?
Fuck, that is tough. I think it's got to be Dancing on My Own.
Yeah, we've talked about not always putting the biggest or most popular song, but this is also the best song.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it has to be. Everything surrounding that song is wonderful.
It's great. I have a not weird. It's not strange. It's not like I'm not about to overshare or anything like that. Robyn is prominent in my memory from the first album, Robyn Is Here. So my mom never really listened to music. My mom had 2 albums.
Okay.
Jagged Little Pill
Mhm.
and Robyn Is Here. And when you were in the car with my dad, he had a lot of CDs or tapes to choose from. I had a Discman I could just sit in the back or whatever if I didn't feel like listening to, whatever.
Yeah, I was a big sit in the back with headphones on, don't speak and listen to music kid.
Yeah, except when Bad Out of Hell.
Yeah,
So
well, of course.
my dad listened to
As
that
we've
a ton.
established, Bad Out of
Yes.
Hell slaps.
Yes. So Robyn Is Here was one of 2 albums that my mom owned and cared about. Some Fridays, not every Friday, as a family, we would watch the Much Music Countdown. If you remember, it cost you money to call in and vote.
It did.
We would, on occasion, try to decide as a family who we would call in and vote for. Robyn was a point of argument because it was my mom's favorite. And the rest of us at the time, 9-year-old me did not appreciate Robyn all that much. It got me thinking, though, as I was reflecting on Robyn about the Much Music Countdown in general. It's kind of a weird thing. Like it very much highlights how much different consuming music 20 years ago was. today.
Yeah. Oh, and it's crazy how much of in Canada anyway. I'm sure it was the same with MTV things, but like what a cultural touchstone that all of us discovered more music through Much Music than anywhere else in our young years.
Absolutely. I would rewrite the countdown in my own order.
Really?
Yeah, I have a ton of weird stuff like that where like
I would definitely get mad at it.
it was very, if you could zoom out and look at me as a child, it was very clear that I was going to be a sports writer or a critic
Just
of some sort.
Excel spreadsheets color coded to the countdown.
Yeah, exactly. So Robyn on June 6th, 1997. Do you know, parenthetical title, What It Takes, debuted on the Much Music Countdown. So June 6th, 1997. It would be on the charts. It debuted at number 27. Also debuting on the charts that week, KRS-One, Step Into a World.
Oh.
Yeah. It's this is going to be really
baby.
This is going to be really hard because it's early summer 1997. It's a long time ago. Any guess at what number 1 on the countdown was?
Early summer 1997?
Yeah.
Can you give me a genre?
The same kind of pop targeted towards kids or toward a young audience that can't get any actual critical analysis, but in this case probably didn't need it.
I have no idea.
Hanson, Mbop.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll talk about Middle of Nowhere one day.
We could do that. Do you have any other Robyn thoughts? Am I
don't
wrapping
think
us
so.
up too quick? I think we're about where we
Yeah, I think we're about where we want to be. No, I don't think so.
Well, next week.
Optimism is good.
Optimism is good. Guys, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for
Talk to you next week.
Oh, hey, please try the fish.